Hi, everyone, and welcome to my new show, Out of Nowhere. This new show has been going for about 3 months now. Had some positive reactions from it. Yes, as always, loads of people in the chat room. There's Steph, Rebecca, Mason, Steph, quite a few more in the chat as well. My guest today is Mark Ollie. Mark is an international recognized author, TV producer, writer, lecturer, broadcaster, musician, and artist. Can we please welcome Mark to the show? Hello there.
Hello, I'm here. I was just thinking then, are you allowed to call a drummer a musician? Because that's what I am.
Yeah, easy, yeah.
Uh, they always say, don't they, that a band's made up of, four musicians and a drummer.
Listen,
You
drummer.
broke
He's
up
the
a little bit there.
Yeah. Man, the drummer is. All right. Can you tell the listeners about yourself?
Yeah, you didn't do too bad a job, actually, in the introduction there. Yeah, I started off as a musician, as a drummer years ago. I was in the music business for probably the best part of 21, 22 years. Then had a back injury, so I switched to writing books. Then I was spotted by ITV Granada, and they said, oh, we can use these books for a TV series. So ended up becoming a presenter, producer, did a series for ITV Granada, done loads of bits and bobs for Sky. Some of your listeners might have seen me on the Crop Circles programme for Ancient Aliens, season 19, episode 2. So I did that last year. Loads of books out. I mean, when you have an injury or whatever, you tend to wonder what to do with your time. So I spent most of the time writing. So there's 9 books out in total. If you go and have a route around on Amazon, you'll find them. Excuse me. And you're no doubt going to prize out of me some information about said books. I'm pretty sure you're going to. More recently, I've been doing quite a lot of UFO stuff, almost by accident. So, yeah, I'm always out there doing something. I mean, last year I had 3 books out, and I managed to put an album out as well in the middle of all that in April with a band I was working with, and it was a busy year. All the back catalogue of stuff went up on YouTube. So I'll get the advertising out of the way. If you want to go and find me on YouTube, go and have a look. It's Mark Ollie, and the TV series was Lost Treasures. But there's a lot of other stuff out there as well. I mean, you could spend, forever. You could binge watch me if you really want to. But that's YouTube. If you want to find any of the books, they're all on Amazon. So go and have a look on Amazon. There's 9 different titles. Type my name in and different ones will come up. And then if you want to get in contact with me, just come and find me on Facebook. Quite ordinary, no problem at all. And the latest book, hey, I'm going to get the plug in here right at the beginning. Here it comes. Well, hey, there it is. Europe's Roswell, 40 years since impact. So that's me venturing back into ufology. Roswell. Yeah, I did a Europe's Roswell documentary back in 2008, and that went out. That went out on Amazon, and Philip Mantle at Flying Disc Press said, let's update it. And I'm like, well, it's never been a book. We never wrote it as a book. We only ever did it as a documentary. So it's all in there. It's all in there, I can assure you. Very good read. It's a proper show and tell. It's got all the information in it, and a couple of new analysis, which you're going to ask me about. And
how did you get involved with Europe then? How did you get to know about it?
It kind of happened in a roundabout way. Being that I have an interest in King Arthur, I used to do a conference in Blackpool called Probe. Sam and Jean used to run this amazing conference up there. Loads of people remember Probe, and they used to have all the different topics up there. So I went up there to do King Arthur, and I ended up meeting a guy called Gary Rowe who was doing this UFO crash. So, I'm kind of a scruffy hippie, covered in like reenactment gear, and I'm talking about legends. And he's a really smart gent, with a proper tie and all that. And he's more like a professor. Anyway, we ended up chatting over a curry after the event. And he said, I've got something I really want you to look into, because you're into archaeology, aren't you? And I'm like, yeah, that's what I do for a living. So he's like, yeah, I really need to speak to you. And eventually he contacted me and he said, we've had this UFO crash and we want to put the archaeologists onto the crash site. So I was like, oh, I don't know. I'm not sure if this is something I can help you with. He said, well, I've got some pieces of the UFO in my garage, if you want to come and have a look. At which point I'm like, okay, I'm hooked. You've sold it on me. There's physical evidence. We've got something we can work with. As it turned out, there wasn't anything for me to dig up. There wasn't any archaeology to do. But then, of course, the production side meant that I could then do a documentary. And it was 25 years since the crash in 2008. So back then we did this documentary that went out all over the place. I think it was on Amazon Prime at one point. And that was just called Europe's Roswell. We put the information out there. We showed people what the fragments were. We told the story, and it was totally ignored by everybody. It was just, a bit like Roswell. It was there in the newspaper.
Say that.
And then it was gone. Go on. Yeah. Well, that's why we picked Roswell for it.
When you talk about that, everybody else talks about Rendlesham.
No. The other one that gets
everybody talks about Rendlesham Forest.
Yeah, the other one's the Berwyn Mountain incident as well, which was just a load of helicopters and fire engines and mountain rescues. That's 1970.
Berwyn Mountain.
Yeah, 1974. They're always getting that one mixed up, and it annoys the hell out of me. So don't get them confused with that. This is 1983. It's the first week of January, 1983. That's when this thing crashed, and it crashed just outside a little village called Clonilla, which is outside of Aberystwyth in mid Wales, and it came down in the middle of the night. Nobody heard anything. It hit trees and it scattered debris across 4 fields. So that's a pretty sizable area to cover in debris, but was still able to fly off. It just flew off. So, the engine and the fuselage and the pilots and the framework and whatever it was, it just left. So we assume that what we've got is the outer coating. It's probably the underside of whatever this thing was. And it cut a swathe through the trees. It was about a maximum of 25 feet across. And it was found by a farmer. This is where it gets spooky, actually. This is where you start to see the crossover with Roswell, because it was Matt Brazel that found all the debris scattered on his ranch over at Corona. And then this is the same thing again. It's a guy called Irwell Evans, comes out to check his sheep, and he finds this rubbish scattered over 4 of his fields. And then the crash recovery team turned up for Roswell. Well, the crash recovery team turned up for this as well, because he phoned it in. He phoned it in as a crash. So the police got hold of it. They got the RAF involved. They cleaned the whole place up, except for the forest, which is where these fragments came from. Now, rumour has it Matt Brazel actually got a few fragments for himself that he hid in a suitcase, but nobody knows where they went. Well, we know where these fragments are. And then the following day in the Roswell case, there's this couple of newspaper articles that appear, and then the whole thing is just hushed up. Well, we've got exactly the same thing at Clonilla, because by the end of January, 23rd of January, this article comes out, Strange Debris from the Sky, and it comes out in the Sunday Express. But that's the only article. It doesn't appear anywhere else. So the Sunday Express must have got hold of it early doors in January. They must have got it when they came back from the New Year break, Christmas New Year break. And they wrote it up and it went out, and it went out in this edition on the 23rd of Jan, which is where Gary Rowe gets involved, because he gets sent a copy of this newspaper article. And he knows Irwell, he knows the area, because Gary lives in North Wales. He knows that area.
Right.
So he goes and investigates the crash, gets these pieces, but the military had obviously got rid of most of it. They cleared the vast majority of it away, which was interesting as well, because it was police, and then it was Air Force, and then it was guys in plain clothes like Men in Black that were ordering everybody else around that did this cleanup operation. Interesting. So it's kind of, it's somewhere the military have got this playbook, and it's, It's sat on the shelf and it says what to do when a UFO crashes. And it's the same thing they did in Wales as they did at Roswell. Go on.
Procedure. Why do you think there's a big cover up then?
Well, over the years, there's always been two different opinions. Obviously, one of the opinions is that the technology is made by us, that it's super technology, that it's top secret, that it shouldn't have been flying. In fact, it might not have even been supposed to have been in the country. If it was American technology, they'd have to admit it was here. So that's one opinion, and that it's just a military cover-up. And then you got the other possibility that, in fact, there's something alien involved in this, that it is, in fact, an unknown type of craft, and the technology that has come down is unknown. And, they're using the same playbook to recover this as they recovered the crash at Roswell. It's the same kind of thing. So you've only really got those two alternatives. And I have to say, you've still only got those two alternatives. There's still no absolutely 100% definitive answer either way. We've had the wreckage analysed, we've had that looked at. We've done the Freedom of Information Act stuff, which came up with some interesting results. Do you want me to share? Do you want me to tell you what the results were? Yeah. Okay. I'll go with the analysis first. What Gary did before he contacted me.
Interesting.
What he did before he contacted me was he went and had a word with British Aerospace, because he had friends in the aerospace industry, and British Aerospace looked at this material he had, and they said it looks like aluminium, so we think it's duralumin, which is this type of aluminium that they already knew about. So they're playing it safe, but they said we can't do the full analysis, it'll cost too much, but that's what we think it is. So that was kind of the UK analysis. But then, interestingly enough, Philip at Flying Disc Press, he contacted me one day and he said, do you think Gary would allow us to analyse any of these samples? And I was very dubious. I said, he's protected this material for the last 40 odd years. He's not going to give us the stuff to play with, So Philip said, well, I'm going to message him anyway. So he messaged Gary, and lo and behold, about 3 or 4 days later, this jiffy bag comes through his letterbox with 3 samples in. So Philip's like, yeah, we could do it. We can analyse it. So he took one of the samples and sent it to Australia, and another sample and sent it to America. And then we start getting the results back. So the results come back from Australia first. They say it's not duralumin, it's this aluminium foam. What happens is you can react aluminium with other substances. It'll foam up and then go solid at room temperature, and you end up with this metal that's really lightweight. So in our opinion, we think it's probably made by the Americans. That's what it looks like. So we're like, oh, well, that's the end of that then. About 2 or 3 days later, we get the one back from America. Now, that's a different ball game. They come back and they say, this is completely unknown. We can tell you what it's made of. And the main component is lanthanum or lanthanum, which is this material that's lanthanum. It's in everything. It's everywhere. It's common as muck, but it's really expensive to refine it and get it out of the ground. It's in comets and asteroids and space and everywhere, but it is so expensive to get this stuff. And they couldn't actually tell us what the other substances attached to the metal were. Neither could the guys in Australia. They couldn't tell us what the other substances were. So it looked like we had 2 different materials, which in fact we do. We have got 2 different materials. But this is where it gets super interesting, okay? The thing that crashed in 1983, and neither of those substances were known in 1983. So that material should not have been flying around in the sky in 1983. It didn't exist. So it doesn't matter really.
Exactly.
Well, it doesn't matter what it is, Yeah.
So what is it?
Well, that's what it is. Now, the best news is that the results, we got the results back before the publishing deadline.
Just makes you wonder.
Well, it does, and it's in the book. So the end results, the analysis, is actually in the book. It's at the end of the book. We stuck it in at the end. I'm just having a quick look as well to show you a few other bits and bobs in the book. The material is that. There it is. That's what we're dealing with. So, like I said, this book really is.
Oh, yeah, I can see that. Yeah, yeah.
It's a proper show and tell. You know, you'll be able to go through this. So it gives you all the information that was in the documentary plus the analysis.
Right.
Now, the bit that's not in the book, so you can have this as an extra. What we did was we put in a Freedom of Information Act during the time that the book was being written, and we got this reply back that basically said, well, you know, this is the local airbase, we don't have any information, but there's a few other places you can try. And they listed a few other places. So there was a few more air bases, the MOD, and eventually you end up with the records office at Kew in London. So we sent off all these Freedom of Information requests. I think there was 5 of them in all. So these start coming back as well. Now, we don't get them all back in time for the book. It was just out of the question. And they're all coming back and they're all going, no, we don't have any information. We don't know what this is. We don't know what that is. Till we get to the one at Kew. And they're the last one to come in. Now, the guy in Kew at the record office, he must have been laughing while he was writing this. Because basically what it said was, we can't possibly tell you about this crash because there are people still living whose names we cannot reveal who were involved in this this operation. So what they basically told us, that they said, oh, we can't tell you anything, but yes, there was a crash, and yes, there was a team of people involved in cleaning it up. So we're like, yeah, okay, that's good enough. So what we've managed to do is we prove that basically the material is alien, quote unquote. It's exotic material. It doesn't belong here. It comes from somewhere, but who knows where. And we also managed to prove that not only did the crash actually take place, but the description. Well, and it was specifically that crash in Glenilla, so we know it's that one. And we also know that the reports of people coming to recover the debris, the cleanup operation, that's also true. So the last record to come in basically validates the entire case. So we're dealing with the real thing. It is the real thing. Stunned silence. That's done it now.
Did anybody check the weather report of that night?
Yeah. It was an extremely cold but clear winter's evening. If there's something a little bit suspicious about what happened, it's the fact that the trees that this thing hit did so much damage. That's proven to be a bit of a thinking point for us, because the lanthium, which we think was the outer shell, you can do all sorts of stuff to it. You can attack it, hit it, drill it, cut it, do all sorts, and it pushes back. It's very difficult to actually break it up. But if you attack it slowly with minimum force, you can snap pieces off it. So we think that the pounding of these trees, as it's going through the top of the forest, smashed all the casing off this thing, because it wasn't designed to fly through trees. So that's interesting. But the weather, I don't think the weather played a part in this. It was just a freezing cold first week of January, a typical Wales winter day, as far as we know. No reports of snow or rain or anything like that, which again makes it a bit odd. Nobody knows why it crashed. I think it was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, whatever it was.
Did you say the Men in Black were involved as well?
Yeah, that's an interesting twist. It comes from 2 different sources. When Roswell saw the cleanup operation, he said that you had uniformed police officers, which that was understandable because that's who he'd phoned. And then you had people from an airbase. He assumed it was the local Air Force. They were there, and uniformed officers from that division were there. But then he said there were these plainclothes people in suits that were ordering everybody else around. They were clearly in charge of the cleanup operation. So Irwell saw them. And then when the news eventually got out that Gary had been there, because obviously somebody somewhere must have known that somebody had been messing about in the forest, because Gary got a knock on his door. And this is towards the end of January. And he said, as he's walking up to the glass door, he said you could see these two black figures outside. So he opens the door, and sure enough, it's your classic men in black. You know, they're wearing a suit and a tie and an incomprehensible pass and a hat. You know, they look like men in black. And there's two of them. And the one at the front says, "Can we have our material back, please?" Or something to that effect. You know, "Can we have our metal back?" And Gary just looked this guy in the face and he just went, "No, no, you can't have it back." So this guy's like, "Why is that then?" And Gary said, "Because I've taken one of the fragments," he said, "and I've broken it up into 100 tiny pieces." He said, "I've put it into key rings and I've given the key rings out to everybody I know that has any connection to the media and to the press." And he said, "If you guys ever come knocking on my door again or try and take this material off me, I'm going to tell all these people to release the key rings to the press." Anyway, these guys apparently just, nodded and walked off up his close in silence, got into these two black unmarked SUVs with all the windows blacked out and no number plates, and just drove off, never to be seen again. So he had a face-to-face with them. So he never told us that on camera, though, in 2008. That was a story that he told us when the cameras weren't rolling. He sat us down and said, "This is serious stuff. They want this material back if they can get their hands on it." And to this date, I'm glad to say, the material has stayed in the public domain. So we can still examine it and try and work out what it is and where it came from. So there's your Men in Black.
Exactly. I know it. Yeah, well, I've had a visit myself with Men in Black, 2017. So I know how frightening it can be.
Yeah,
Very scary when they turn up at your door.
Well, fortunately, Gary had definitely thought ahead, because I got one of the key rings off him when I met him at this probe conference, and there's at least another two of the key rings have turned up since. Philip's got one, the publisher, and another friend that we know's got one. So they're still out there. People have still got them. And as far as we can tell, it's the lanthanum as well. It's the alien material that's in the key rings. So if you've got a key ring out there, please keep hold of it, because it's valuable stuff.
Oh, definitely valuable.
Oh, that was
and what you said about the case.
Yeah, well, this stuff, I was going to say, this material, some of the sheets of this material that was scattered across the field were 6 foot square. They were 2 meters square. Now, the cost, you're talking millions of dollars to get at this lanthanum and make this stuff. And there was enough of it to cover 4 fields.
Yeah.
So that's another mystery as well. The sheer cost of losing that amount of purified lanthanum is phenomenal. Where did it all come from? So we still don't have a, is it one of theirs? Is it one of ours? Is it back engineered?
Definitely.
Who knows?
I know. I think Steph in chat room said it looks like honeycomb.
Yes. Basically, the outside of it is covered in a green honeycomb. It's like a kind of rubber substance, and the little hexagons are about the same size as honeycomb. And then if you go behind the metal, inside the metal, there was a honeycombed tin foil as well, that built up the structure. So you had a layer of this aluminium foam, then a layer of this honeycomb tin foil, and then on the outside surface, we're assuming it's the outside surface, you've got this layer of lanthanum with those little rubber honeycombs all over it. we've had one or two reports from military contacts that we have that potentially it looks a bit like stealth. It's some kind of stealth technology. And also, one of the reports that came back, funnily enough, the one that came back from America, said we're having terrible problems photographing this because whenever we send electrons at it to electron use it on our electron microscope, the metal is sending the electrons back. So there's a photograph in the book that looks like it's distorted. Well, it is distorted because the metal is still active. It's pushing the signals back. Well, if you're flying in a craft that's covered in that, it's going to do the same thing with radar. So that's, part of its invisibility technology, as far as we can tell. I'm going way beyond what's in the book. I mean, I don't speculate as much as this in writing. I've left it open for people, to have a good think about it. But that's what I think it is. Go on. I didn't get.
If you touch it, do you feel any energy from it or anything? If you touch the metal, do you get any?
No, it doesn't seem to have any electrical properties in itself. There's been a couple of, I've got a key ring, you see, so there's been a couple of occasions when I've taken the key ring out with me. And people who do psychometry and dowsing and things like that, they've picked it up and they've just gone, wow, this is alien. It feels just like a meteorite. This has been in space. So if you go on that side of things, if you're using, the human's ability to read materials, it does appear that this material has, shall we say, been around a bit. It's not necessarily just terrestrial. There's a little bit more to it, I think. Yeah.
Why do you think Roswell is quite a hotbed for UFOs?
Could you repeat the question? I lost you in the middle of the question then.
Why do you think Wales is quite a hotbed for UFO sightings?
Well, that's a really good question. I can give you a few examples, actually. When I was out doing a presentation on this, a lady came up to me and she said I was an art student at Aberystwyth, she said, and I opened my curtains in my digs one day and I saw this UFO coming up out of the sea. And she said, I grabbed a camera and took a photo of it, but I don't know where the photo's gone. She said, if I can find it, I'll send it you. Anyway, she never did. But when I spoke to Gary and I shared that story to Gary, he said, the local RNLI station, the lifeboat station, has actually got the phone number for the RAF. And when they see these lights coming up out of Cardigan Bay, they just phone up and report them. They report them in regularly. So clearly there's a lot of activity going on in that area around Cardigan Bay. But then also, Gary and his team observed there's a lot of stuff going on up the valleys. There's a lot of incidents that occur and sightings, and people come face to face with these craft in North Wales. Well, if you're low enough, if you go zipping up these valleys, at speed, you're below radar. So it's created this thing now called the North Wales Triangle. So if you go up the coast, you go across sort of along the Mersey Valley and then join the dots back down to sort of Aberystwyth area. You've got this big triangle over Snowdonia and Anglesey and coming round into Liverpool Bay and what have you. And there's just tons of stuff going on in that area. Absolutely loads. Some of it, I have to say, some of it could well be military, because you've got your military activity and you've got major airfields at Chester, Liverpool, Manchester, etc. So some of it could be that. I believe the military eventually admitted to flying stealth drones out of Manchester Airport at one point. So a lot of the sightings over Winter Hill in the 1990s, that was the military flying drones, triangular drones. But it doesn't rule all the other craft out that are seen regularly in Wales. And I think it's this idea that the population's low, You're under the radar. There's loads of places around there that you can hide, and I think that's what's going on. I think that's where this technology is being used more than anywhere else. And to some extent, I mean, I'm not ruling out South Wales. They get stuff in the Brecon Beacons and whatnot as well. So any areas that are sort of fairly deserted, but Wales is a hot spot. Definitely North Wales, definitely a hot spot.
Have you had your own sighting then, Mark?
Yes, definitely. You're back into book territory again. Because Philip asked me the same question, the publisher, and he said, "Have you got anything of interest yourself?" And I said, "Well, I've got at least 2 stories that I can put in. One of them was the summer of 1976. Anybody that's of a certain age will remember that. If you were a teenager in 1976, it was like being in the Bahamas. It was the hottest year on record. Well, I went camping up in a local village on a farmer's field. And we couldn't put the tent up. You couldn't pitch the tent because back then you had canvas tents with wooden pegs. You couldn't knock the pegs into the ground. The ground was just solid, baked clay, fired clay. It was that hot. So we dumped the tent and we slept on top of it under the stars. And I woke up in the early hours and looked up into the sky and I just saw this star. Now, there were no satellites up there in 1976. I just saw this star moving across the star field. It's only going really slowly. And it started on the horizon, and then when it got over the top of me, it bounced back and then vanished. So I was like, what on earth was that? Horizon to horizon to horizon to horizon, and then gone. I thought, that was incredible, absolutely incredible. That was when I was 14. Anyway, fast forward a bit, you're back into the territory where you were talking about this triangle, UFO triangle. So you're now in 1980s. I think it was 1981.
Yeah.
Hang on. I'll just check it because I actually got it in the book. I'm pretty sure it was 81. It's been a while since anybody's asked me this. Let me just double check. Yeah, 1981. April 81. So I've just finished doing a recording session in a local studio because at this point I'm a session drummer. And it was the early hours of the morning, probably about 1:30. I came out of the recording session and headed for a local hill because what I used to do was go and sit on the hill to wind down and then come home and go sleep. But then I'm sat on this hill around about 2:00. I'm looking up the Mersey Valley towards Liverpool because you can see Liverpool and Manchester from this hill. And there's a big power station up here called Fiddler's Ferry Power Station. And all of a sudden, the steam coming off the power station, it just lit up like a disco. And this thing comes flying through the steam just over the top of one of these cooling towers. Now, that's pretty bonkers because it's 40 degrees heat. This is hot steam. Anyway, it comes flying through and it's got all these white and blue and red lights going here, there and everywhere. And the lights themselves are changing colours. So it looks a bit like one of the little scout ships out of Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Anyway, it comes up the Mersey Valley and it's on the north bank. So there's not very much on the north bank. Comes sailing up the Mersey Valley till it gets sort of level with Warrington. And then all the lights go off and you can just see outline this something or other about the size of a small truck outlined in the light pollution. And then it hovers there for a split second and then just shoots up and disappears into the sky. Fast forward about, 10, 11, 12 years, the same story appears in Jenny Randall's book, Mysteries of the Mersey Valley. And it tells you how a pilot over on the Wirral saw this thing flying below him. And then some campers who were camping on a nearby hill see this thing take off. And they watch it fly in a straight line and disappear through the steam on the power station. Well, I see it come out of the other side, don't I? It's the same thing. And it goes in a straight line. It flies in a straight line for about 14 miles. And everything ties up. All the timing and everything ties up. So I managed then to put together this whole timeline, and that appears in a UFO book that's on Flying Disc Press. I can't remember the title of the book, but it's all different accounts of how people got into ufology. So I put that in as mine. Mine's in it. I can't remember the book. I can remember the cover, but anyway, it's in there. And now it's also in this book. It's in mine. So I finally got it as the introduction to Europe's Roswell. There is another story that's not in the book, and that was because it didn't really happen to me. And that's, you fast forward now to the 1990s, and I'm on an archaeological dig, and it's gone dark, and we're in Derbyshire. We were in Buxton. I'm minding my own business. I think we were all getting ready for bed. Everyone had started camping and that. All of a sudden, one of the female diggers comes running in and goes, "You're not going to believe this. We've just been buzzed by a big silver flying disc." She said it came over the top of the camp. It sort of dove bombed them, if you liked, came over the top and flew off. She said there was loads of us saw it. There's probably about 7 or 8 or 9 of them that saw this thing come over. And it buzzed them. It flew over the top of them and buzzed them. So she came running in and told me, and I was like, oh, I missed that. I wish I'd have seen that. So that was another one as well. So being out and about, doing archaeology and stuff, you see these things flying around, but some of them are spectacular. That was a good one. And the one I saw in the Mersey Valley, that was equally good. So I definitely know these things are out there. I wouldn't be able to tell you what they are, but they're there. There's no doubt about it, Oh, here we go. Hey, I'm getting the posts now. They're coming up at the bottom.
I know Steph just said, I definitely think the phenomena is attracted to people or the creative type.
Yeah, I think
creative type.
Yeah, I think I'm very open-minded. I've had lots of other experiences as well. I wasn't brainwashed at school, I didn't sort of get hammered under the thumb, mainly because I grew up in a haunted house, which is a bit of an experience. From the age of 7 up to probably the age of 21, 22, I was living in a haunted house. So you kind of get used to, paranormal and that. Just paranormal's perfectly normal as far as I'm concerned. So absolutely, I agree with Steph there. I am a creative. I know lots of people who are creatives. We do seem to think and feel differently. So these things, mind you, that having been said, especially with UFOs, pretty much all kinds of people, everybody, I think, of every possible, mindset and employment, from military and police all the way down to the local farmer. Everybody's seeing these things. I don't think it's limited to the creatives. I think we're just a bit more open-minded once we do see these things. Maybe. Hey up. Oh gosh, that's a belter, isn't it? I like that.
Yeah. Have you ever found?
Yeah, have I ever found anything on a dig that doesn't fit in with history as we're told? Yeah. Yeah. Yes, but kind of yes, but kind of no. I know what she's thinking. I've not sort of found a mobile phone trapped in a Roman layer or, a Coke tin in a prehistoric cave. I've not sort of found anything on that kind of level. But I've definitely found things that shouldn't have been there. I mean, me and a friend of mine were out doing some photographic work on an archaeological site up here in Cheshire. And she goes down to the bottom of the field and starts pulling off pieces of flint. And they only turn out to be 480,000 BC. They're Hoxnean, they're Ice Age. So in about 10 minutes of picking these 8 pieces of flint out of this bit of the field, we rewrote the entire history of Britain. We changed the entire Ice Age just in a few minutes, because they shouldn't have been there. It was a campsite. So I've come across plenty of bits and bobs like that, things that don't fit in that sense. I think a lot of the timelines and the dating and stuff like that, I think, is messed up. I own a crystal skull as well that comes from South America. Oh, hey up. This is a good one.
Another question from Alison. Hey, Mark. What is the most scary experience?
Right, okay. They always say your first one is the worst. So 7 years of age, I'm lying in bed minding my own business. I wake up in the middle of the night, the bedroom's really cold, and I'm thinking this is wrong because the heating's on. And I can just see at the bottom corner of my bed this Victorian figure, and he's wearing a jacket, waistcoat with a pocket watch, in like green and brown flecked tweed, matching trousers, short black hair, piercing blue eyes, and he's staring down at me. But the reason I know it's not right, apart from the fact the bedroom's freezing cold, is that his head is nearly at the ceiling and I can see the wardrobe through him, even though he's in full colour. And I was just scared witless. I just dove under the bed covers and stayed there for goodness knows how long. But once I got past that, in terms of the supernatural, the scary element didn't really scare me. I was one of these people that could go and wander through a cemetery at midnight on Halloween, didn't bother me at all. Come face to face with the devil, I'd just shake his hand, go, yeah, okay, it's just another supernatural occurrence, because I lived with it on a daily basis. So if you really want to know what really scared me more than anything else, when I was filming Lost Treasures, I had to do a scene where I was stood on top of the Liver building in Liverpool, on the edge of the parapet, with a 169-foot drop right in front of me, no safety net, no safety harness. For goodness sake, don't tell ITV any of this, whatever you do. And I'm literally, all I can see is like people and cars running around like ants. So if you can imagine doing like, the kind of, the Spider-Man, Superman, Batman thing where you stood there looking at heroic with your clothes blowing in the wind. It looks great on film, but I was absolutely terrified. That's the scariest thing I think I've ever done in my life. Far scarier than coming face to face with anything supernatural. So there you go. You got 2 for 1 out of me there. Great question.
Okay. I've got another question. Mark, have you ever come across evidence of possibility interaction of the phenomena with it?
With Neanderthals.
Andreas.
Neanderthals, yeah, it's a species of human. You've changed book actually, because if you want to know about Neanderthals, go and get Crystal Skulls and Human Heads, because I really get stuck into this kind of information in that book. What is really strange is that they're another species of humans. So I'm not sure about alien-human interaction or anything like that. What I am sure about is that up to date, there are 27 different species of humans that we know of that have gone extinct. So that's everything from little tiny pygmy humans all the way up to giants, which begins to open an enormous can of worms. Because then you've got the question, okay, if the planet was as diverse back then in that species, our species, as it is in a lot of the other species, what are we missing? What was the planet like back then? It's nothing like we think it was. Forget evolution, just goes out the window. We're devolving. Things are getting worse rather than better. So it just turns everything on its head. So I've not actually come across any evidence of, how they viewed different phenomena, but I think that they were much more aware of it than we are. These guys with the enormous stretched heads, their psychic abilities would have been off the Richter scale. What they were capable of doing. I mean, you only got to look at what they built, pyramids and enormous walls and, all the strange things that they did. And, how the hell did they shift some of the blocks of stone? And it just goes on and on and on and on. You only got to watch a series of Ancient Aliens to realize that there's something really strange going on. It's a massive subject. So yeah, don't limit yourself to just thinking in terms of aliens. Go and buy Crystal Skulls and Human Heads, and that'll get you started. There's so many different subjects in there that we know about, that are proper hard science, that they're trying to cover up. That'll blow your mind.
On that thing note, tell us a little bit about Crystal Skulls.
Okay.
And the benefits of having one.
Well, I don't know if there's any benefits to having one. I mean, I've got one. There's probably only a dozen or so real ones that have ever been established, on the planet, and I've got one sat in the other room. And basically, they're just made of quartz. But the quartz side of it, the fact that they're life size, the fact that they were made, especially things like the Mitchell Hedges skull, where they just don't know how that was made. You just can't tell. There are no manufacturing marks on it. It's made of solid crystal. Things like that straight away get the alarm bells ringing. And you start thinking these things are really strange. They're odd. I've got to confess, nobody really knows what they were for. They do bizarre things with light. If you get light going through them, they're just absolutely incredible, spectacular even. But again, why they were made and the connections to life and death are many and various there, depending on, most of them are South American, I'll be honest. Most of them come from the jungles, the Aztec or Mayan or Olmec, they're all that kind of thing. But exactly why they made them, nobody really knows. What is interesting, though, is the connection to quartz silica, because the entire planet is basically made of quartz silica. That's what it is. We're carbon life forms living on a silicon planet. The whole thing's a giant crystal spinning through space. All the science for that is in the book. So they must have had some affinity. They must have realized that quartz was really important. It's also a recorder as well. You can record stuff into glass, quartz silica, but we just don't know how to get the information back out of crystals. We can do it with a piece of clear glass. We can write into that and get the data back out of it, but we've been able to do that since the 1990s, but we don't know how to get the information out of a piece of quartz. Any more questions?
Very interesting, that is. I know that Alison just said now, she said, I know you can't probably, you haven't got time.
Well,
Can
it depends.
You show us, Mark, a crystal?
I'll have to go and get it. If you've got 2 seconds, can you sing or recite a poem or dance or just do something for a moment while I go and grab it? All right, I've never done this before. Hold on.
No problem. No problem. He's just going to go get the crystal skull to show everybody the one he's got, and I'm sure it's the real deal. We use crystals today in science and everything. So it just makes you wonder why they made them in the first place.
Right. I'm wired for sound again. Here we go. It's the joys of doing live TV, this, isn't it? Dearie me. Right, let's hope I got the right box.
Yeah, that's right. It is.
Here we go. Here he comes. Are you ready for this? There he is. Don't know if you can.
Oh, yes.
See, he's quite friendly.
See that.
There we are.
Is it heavy?
Yeah, he's quite heavy. I'm struggling a bit to. You can see he's quite.
Alison.
He's life size, but he's kind of.
It's
the size of a small child, but he is. There he is. I can't really. I haven't got a torch, otherwise I'd light him up for you. But
thank you for that.
There he is. It's an interesting.
Yes, thank you for that.
It's all right, no worries at all. I've got a copy of the Mitchell Hedges one as well for comparison. This is only made of resin, but that's the famous one. That's the famous Mitchell Hedges one, which has a separate jaw. Oh, there you go. The jaw in that one's separate. Well, that's a copy. Yeah. You can see that there's quite a difference in terms of quality. That's what the Mitchell Hedges one looks like. So you can get some idea if I put them side by side.
Yeah.
That's comparison. Ooh, there we go. They're not far off the same size.
So how did you...
There we go.
Yeah.
How did I acquire him? It's an interesting story, actually.
That's right. Yeah, they are.
At the end of the Second World War, there was an aid worker working in South America for the Mayans. He was in a Mayan village. Now, the Mayans, I don't know if you know this, but the Mayans don't necessarily get on very well with the Aztecs. So they really don't care about Aztec stuff. They're not that bothered. So when this guy was leaving, I think it was 1947, he left the village, came back to the West. They said, well, here, you can have this as a souvenir. So they gave him that. So he chucked it in his luggage and brought it back to this country. Now, as a custodian of a proper crystal skull, obviously he treated it with a great deal of respect. But then he himself started to get too old. You know, he realised that his days were numbered. So he passed this on to his Masonic Lodge master. So the Masonic Lodge master said, well, that's a bit of a privilege, but yeah, I'll look after it. In turn, the Masonic Lodge master got too old and came looking for an archaeologist with an interest in South America. And he found me. So that's how I've ended up with him. So I've ended up being the third owner since it came out of the jungle. So that's kind of how it's ended up here. He's a little belter. You know, he comes around and does shows with me and what have you. And, you know, he's a nice little guy to have. Yeah. I should really put him back so you can still see him, but there we are. So yeah, that's my crystal skull. So yes, Alison.
Yeah, I like it.
I can show you the crystal skull.
Amazing.
Have we got any more?
Arthur C. Clarke she's on about as well.
Oh yes, Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World.
Yeah, we have. Yeah,
it has the Mitchell Hedges.
Got another one now.
Top. Oh,
what is Mark's opinion about the handbag symbols found in Sumerians? What do you think it means?
Right. Okay. I've started to look into this out of curiosity. I think the bag itself carries something of incredible sacred importance to the people carrying it. Now, I have to say, the Maoris have got it, and the Sumerians have got it, the Olmecs have got it. It's all over the world. It's everywhere. They're all carrying these little bags, you know. So I did wonder if, especially in the case of the Babylonians and the Sumerians, they used to fire clay tablets with written information on them. That's what all the libraries and everything are made up of. They're made up of these fired clay tablets. No. And I wondered if one of those handbag type things would carry a couple of these Sumerian or whatever Babylonian written tablets, because the number one most sacred thing you could possibly have would be writing. It would be the ability to transmit messages and information from one place to another and from one person to another. So I wonder if those bags are actually for carrying these tablets in. It'd be great if somebody could find one on a dig site somewhere, you know, so we could answer it once and for all. But I wonder if that's what they are, information carrying bags, you know, which kind of feeds into, you know, I saw somebody online the other day saying, well, maybe it's for carrying your laptop or your tablet. You know, because you get these little bags now for carrying computers in. So maybe there's a computer in there, you know, Babylonian computer. Well, that's like the equivalent of these, what these tablets would have been, you know, it made mathematical calculations or astronomical observations, you know, whatever. So I'm going to go with that. I think they're a specifically designed form of carrier for carrying written information in them. I think that's what's inside those bags. So there you go. That's currently my best theory. I knew someone was going to ask.
Well, that were a good one there.
That was a belt.
I know Alison said, did you know Arthur C. Clarke?
I never got to meet him. He's one generation older than me, because you've got people like Eric von Daniken and people like that who were producing most of their information in the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s. Well, I was only born at the beginning of the 1960s. I know I look about 200, but I'm not really 200. I've just had a hard life, you know. But I was born at the beginning of the 1960s. I'm producing most of my stuff in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. So, you know, it's a different generation. I think Arthur had gone before I really appeared on the scene. You know. Okay, that's an interesting one.
Another question there, Carper. Yeah. Dolly Saffron swears that those handbags are now beings coming to and out of our existence.
Okay, if you're limiting those handbags only to the gods of Babylon and Sumeria, then I'd be like, yeah, maybe, possibly, because those gods in that pantheon all seem to be carrying them. But then as soon as you move on a bit, you start looking at the Huns and the Egyptians and the Celts and it doesn't carry right across the board. It doesn't. What about the Chinese? It doesn't work with the other cultures that were around at the time, but they've all got them, or they've got a variety of them. Now if you're sending messages, if that bag meant you were communicating, you're sending a specific message, then that goes right across all the cultures, doesn't it? If you've got a bag, then you're on a mission because you're communicating a message to somebody. That makes sense. That kind of makes sense to me. I'm not saying that the message wouldn't be, bizarre or odd or otherworldly, or from the gods or whatever. Who knows? But I don't think they disappear into a handbag and then fly off in a handbag. I don't think that happens. Good question.
No, I don't think so. Alison's on about. Yes. Alison's on about.
She really
Please
likes
show us
this.
the skull again before you go. Oh, thank you.
See if I can get him on camera. There he is.
She does.
It's just a shame I haven't got a torch. I'd light him up if I had a torch, but there he is.
Yeah.
He's very well done because he's milky at the front, milky quartz at the front. He's clear in the middle, and then the back here is smoky quartz. So they've started off with a socking great big enormous block of quartz, and then cut it to produce the skull. You can see the workmanship in that is just phenomenal. And if you can get a torch in there, the clear bit in the middle, that all lights up with rainbows. So there's optical stuff going on. You can tell it's handmade as well, because if you can see the light shining off his head, you can see all the little flat surfaces. You might be able to see that. Yeah, they're all hand cut. That has never been on a machine. It's never been anywhere near a machine of any kind. Everything you see there is hand carved, which kind of gives it away as being an old one, But there you go. He's a nice one. He's a nice one to have.
Stardew's in the chat room says, I'll just put you this up. Last one here. What's the
I knew someone was going to ask. I knew someone was going to ask that. If you have a look in Arthur C. Clarke, there's the Mitchell Hedges skull. And it's got 12 other skulls around it. It was the legendary uniting of the skulls that they did in the 1970s. This skull is the bottom left-hand skull on that photograph, because it was on the photo with the Mitchell Hedges one. At that time, his name was Jason. He's referred to as Jason. So, but we don't have a name. We just have a nice shiny crystal skull. But yeah, Jason. He's called Jason.
Yes. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Very.
It would have been a bitter disappointment if I had said his name was.
Sure, everybody's saying thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, that's all right. You'd have all been disappointed if I said his name was Tim or Bob, or Fred.
It's like Jason the Argonauts.
Yeah.
Yes. Exactly. Everybody's saying yes. So where can people find you if they need to get in touch with you, and where can they get your books?
Right. Okay. If they want to come and get in contact with me, Facebook, send me a friend request to Facebook, and then we can chat on Messenger. Okay. Come find me on Facebook. I look like this, but I'm a cartoon character at the moment, so you'll know it's definitely me. If you want to buy any of my stuff, it's all on Amazon. Everything's on Amazon. go on there, click, order it. It'll come flying through your letterbox a few days later. If you go for the King Arthur book, get the hardback, because the hardback's brilliant. Other than that, doesn't really matter. And then if you want to just watch more of me, go and binge watch me. Go and have a look on YouTube. So there's a ton of stuff on YouTube now.
I bet there is. I bet you've been on there years.
Oh, yeah, far too long. Far, far too long.
But thank you, Mark, for coming on the show. Everybody says what a brilliant guest you are to come on the show. And a lot of was at the awakening when you were speaking there as well. Alison, Joanne, Rebecca.
Nice to see everybody again. Yeah.
Diane. Alex.
When they do another awakening, I'll be there.
They were all at the awakening.
Yeah, if they do another one, I'll make sure I'm
brilliant. There. James just said, I agree, Alison. Amazing guest. Thank you, Bob and Mark, for a great show tonight.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, so thank you. Thank you again. It's been great as usual. I'll just see. Oh, yeah. Yeah, so thank you again. It's been interesting as you. I love you having on the show. It's always interesting because you can talk about lots of different subjects. And maybe next time you come on the show, we'll talk about we go to the moon.
Oh, get me on that one. Whoa. Hey. Yeah. Yeah.
I know that. I'll get you back on again sometime in the future.
Definitely.
And we can talk, Jack, because I know what you're going to say.
That's why I'm not saying it now.
Anyway, you have a lovely weekend.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have a lovely weekend, Mark.
Same to you guys.
Thank you
and all
for
your
coming
listeners.
on the show.
Absolute pleasure.
And everybody in the chat room as well. Thank you for all the questions. We can't do a show without the questions. It's always good. So you take care. I'll catch up with you again sometime, Mark.
Okay. I'm about to
Might
disappear.
see you
all right.
at another awakening conference.
Well, yeah, as soon as they do another one,
Thank
like
you.
I say, I'll be there.
Thank you again.
Pleasure.
Oh, I know you will.